Hi guys, it is Dom here. I just had a wonderful chat with Robert DeFelice from Fightful, who of course is a broadcaster with cerebral palsy, about accessibility, about getting his job at Fightful, about working in wrestling journalism, and his background and what it was like growing up with CP for Robert. Really motivational chat. I'm a big fan of his work as a fellow wrestling fan and journalist. So I hope you guys enjoy this, and thank you so much for watching. Cheers. Okay, so I'm here with Robert DeFelice from Fightful. Mate, it's an absolute pleasure to sit down with you and talk about accessibility. I've watched your interviews on Fightful, been a big fan for a long time. You do a lot of hard work. Can you take me through kind of a day in your life and what it is that you do, day in, day out, you're kind of, from waking up to going to bed. Not that it looks like you get that much sleep. You seem to be busy all the time. Take me through a typical day in your life and what it is that you do typically.
So first of all, thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I'm glad you reached out. A day in my life is very interesting because waking up with CP, it can be a bit of a grind. Like the
Yeah,
waking up is the hardest part for me,
yeah,
where you just sort of feel like, oh boy, here we go again. And that's probably the most time where the aches set in, is in that first like hour of the morning. And then by the time you get up, you stretch, you do whatever you got to do. I start to feel a little bit better, a little more energized throughout the day. But for me, mostly it's about staying active because while this is a very like stationary job, I do get up, I do stretch just to make sure. Because, if you stay in one position too long, even without the disability, you're going to be in a lot of pain. But with the disability, it could be killer. But yeah, my day to day is a lot of just work for Fightful, and I am so fortunate to have a job that is so accommodating for me just in its nature, even without having to get into like special accommodations for me. And I've just been loving my time there.
that's awesome, man. I'm glad you treated so well by such a great company. Big fan of Fightful for a long time, and like I say, a fan of your work. Could you take me back then to, I guess, the beginning of every good story, the beginnings of your life? What kind of challenges were there for you growing up? For me, for example, I'm lucky to be alive. Me and my mum both very lucky to be alive. Was born many weeks premature, which is where the cerebral palsy comes into it for me. What about yourself? Take me through kind of your early life and some of the struggles that you faced in your younger days.
Definitely similar to you in the sense that very lucky to even be here. I was born at like a good 3 months, like before I was supposed to. And of course, that did bring on the cerebral palsy. I think the challenges when I was younger stem just like getting around. Like I got around in school in a wheelchair, at home for a long time. I was just like crawling. I didn't start like base walking like most people would until I was about 9, 10 years old. And
Wow.
then once that happened, then you kick open so many doors, like 'cause life just becomes easier. And even to this day, I still get around the house just fine walking around, and that it allows me to live that much more of a traditional life. And trust me, it's one of those things where when you have to think about every step you take nothing for granted. And there are times where going back to waking up in the morning, like I literally have to shake myself into like a mode of, oh yeah, like people don't normally feel this. Like most people just kind of get up on their feet and they're going. I sometimes have to remind myself of that. But yeah, like when I was younger, it was a lot of that, of like struggling getting around, struggling. Then when you want to make improvements, having to go through the right channels, because honestly it is concerning, and you do have to go through a lot of physical therapy. And I'm lucky enough that I had physical therapy at a young enough age where it mattered. I will also say the therapist matters because look, there are some people who will do the bare minimum with a child and that will help them, but it won't allow them to grow. And then there are some that will really get you in the mindset of, okay, living life and life beyond just stretches. So it all depends on the therapist. I do have to commend your side of the world, though. You guys seem to be very good about disability and disability care. And I do have to say, I see a lot of that, and I like what I see from that side of the world.
Yeah, yeah, I was certainly very similar experiences. I actually hadn't met anybody who, because I was crawling till around 9, 10 as well, and it was always really because I was like, oh, maybe I was, maybe I was just lazy, but you know what I mean. Like it was quite difficult, and it's really interesting to hear your experiences, Robert. And I was very lucky. I had a great physiotherapist who really, really pushed me alongside my family, and I think that that's what I wanted to ask you next is what kind of environment did you have, school, home, in terms of, nurturing? Was it nurturing, or did you kind of have to motivate yourself a lot? I mean, obviously, you mentioned your physical therapist and stuff there being a big part of your growth and development. But what was your environment like at home and at school? Were there supportive people there for you there?
Definitely supportive people, but it's also a little bit of a mixed bag because where you have a lot of support, you also have a lot of perhaps over care. Like you have a lot of like, I am very concerned about every step you take. So there is that balance there, but I was always lucky to have an environment that at least made me feel loved. You know what I mean? Like, and that does count for a lot. I will say that there were difficulties when you want to start being a little more independent because as most parents would, they're going to get really nervous. I'm a bit on the shorter side. I could be, so when you're going out on like dates or whatever, of course, the first thing that's going to come into a concerned parent's mind is, oh, that kid's a bit of an easy target for some of the less than stellar people in the world. But, I have to say that I am fortunate enough to have a environment that always believed in me, even if like when it comes to the things that I'm doing now for work, they didn't believe in that so much. And I can't say I blame them for not believing that their son would be able to talk into a camera about wrestling and make a living. But they did always try to push for me to have the most nurturing and traditional upbringing possible.
Fantastic. It's great to hear about, again, your upbringing and the support there. And thank you for sharing that. You mentioned going on dates there. That was something I was going to bring up a little bit later on, but it's a nice little segue. How has your experience been with going out and kind of, I guess, making friends as well as relationships and that kind of thing? Because, so I, grew up sort of 90s, early 2000s, and I had some very supportive people, but I also had people say directly to me, that I was very nice, but they wouldn't go out with me because of my disability, or they didn't want to be friends with me because they were embarrassed. Obviously, these are, couple of people, not the majority. I've got some very good friends and very good. I've obviously got a very lovely partner now, and I've had some lovely, experiences in the past. But this is about you, just as a little bit of an introduction there. Can you tell me about your experience making friends and also in relationships and things like that, and how people have been?
So again, I think there's some similarities there. I think I always went into situations a little more conscious and a little more, trepidatious about things like that because
Mm,
I was always, maybe too self-aware that I was like a lot to handle in some cases.
mm,
But I would say dating wise, I was lucky enough, like in high school, like really when I started dating, I was dating another person with CP. So those experiences kind of helped get into that world. But like do it now, I'm currently single. So like when you're doing the Tinder dance and that's a bit of a bother when it comes to like having to put up with the CP. But I would say that I was probably the more trepidatious one there. As far as friends, like I never felt it too much. Currently, because I think of the way the world works, a lot of my friends are scattered throughout the globe. But I have some great friends who, love me for who I am, and I think that that's all you can really ask for.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I think, for anybody watching this or listening to it, anybody with CP or any kind of difference in disability, what would be your key tips now? We'll sort of go back and forth between career and personal life, but, in terms of, you know, kind of that independence and kind of going for that and taking those risks of going out there and going on dates, trying to find jobs and all these things that you've been able to do. But people are going to be nervous. People are going to be anxious. Again, it's like every step you take, you have to think about. This is something that I really identify with. I got to think about everything. It's like a spider sense, where I move in the house, where I move out in the
Hmm.
world. Um, for those people that are nervous and anxious, about trying to find jobs, about going out on dates on Tinder, doing the Tinder dance and all that stuff. What would be your tips for anybody who, might want to take some inspiration from your own experiences?
So here's where I'll tell you to be like me. There's some places here where you should be like me, and I would say it's in the job area
Okay.
because I wouldn't say no until I got a job on my own uh, merit and doing something I loved. And I would suggest be like me in that way. However, in the personal life, I would say do the exact opposite of me. The world
Okay.
is so much more accommodating now, and I think that's like the beautiful thing of it is growing up for me. I never wanted to be this, like, okay, I don't want to be the guy with CP. I just wanted that to be a small part of who I am. Whereas I think now with the, microscope on representation, it's like a welcomed thing and people want to know that experience and want to be a part of that. So I would say don't be like me in that way. Really go for it, really try to mingle, get out there, but when it comes to jobs, I can say, listen, I was very determined, didn't take no for an answer. Be like me in that way, know what you want to do, be passionate about what you want to do, because that's the only way that you're really gonna enjoy your day to day.
Absolutely, very, very clear and concise there. And I do want to talk to you about Robert about the job and working at Fightful, which we'll get to. What do you think is the biggest misconception then, in your experience, around CP and around difference in that way? What do you find you come up with? Where people make assumptions about what you're capable of, or just general misconceptions they have about your ability, and you wish people would have well, I don't know whether maybe people would be a bit more educated, if you know what I mean.
I think that there is a real issue of like, well, they see the physical issues, and it depends on how you meet people first. Because if you meet people and they see the physical first, they're going to come into every interaction with you very trepidatious, like, okay, can you do this? Do I need to overhelp here? Like, I'm worried about interacting with this person because I don't know what they're capable of. Whereas I think if you meet someone more like this and you have the conversation first and you see where their head's at, it allows you to treat them more like the average person, for lack of a better term. And I think the biggest misconception is sometimes when you get that eye on, oh boy, this person has real physical limitations, that means like I can't approach them like anyone else. And I think that for the most part, that's what people want. They just want to be treated as you would any other friend. They want to be messed with. They want to be, included. And I think that's the hardest part is if you're not able to introduce yourself first, there might be that huge barrier of, oh, I see what this person is struggling with. I don't want to feel too comfortable with them now.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of making assumptions there. Yeah. So people, what I've kind of heard there is sometimes people can make assumptions before you've been able to prove what you're able to
Yeah,
do.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, we'll get to Fightful where you are now making a living, talking about what talking about things you love. But you mentioned there about misconceptions and things. When you've been out for a job and when you've tried to get work and stuff, has that been a barrier in some cases, most cases, or no cases at all? Have you been able to traditionally find work and find opportunities, despite people's whether those preconceptions or not?
So I will say that in the limited time that I tried looking for work, there was a brief period where I spent about a year in Hawaii and I had done some like, I had tried to get a job there and there was like zero takers. So
Right.
I really had gotten my start, unfortunately, doing like cold calls because like that was an easy work from home job. And then thankfully, I didn't have to do that for too long until I got into the wrestling media game. But I will say, getting a job was a bit difficult. And I can honestly say that I never got to have to deal with that experience for too long. For the better, though, because I think it all worked out.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned spending a year in Hawaii. It's a beautiful place. What brought you to what? So give me a timeline then, Robert, from your again your sort of career then. So you kind of so obviously I know a little bit about your home life, but talk me through kind of what happened to you in terms of where you've been and things like that before coming to before getting to where you are now.
So, so I had spent most of my life in New York. I was born and raised in Queens,
Nice.
and I have an aunt that lives in Hawaii, and my mom and I had decided, okay, we're gonna spend a week there. We ended up not going back. We ended up just spending a year there. We decided it was the best case scenario to just fresh reset on life. And that was like the first time, like, okay, you're out of your New York home now. Now you're about 21 years old. You should probably start doing something and trying to make your way. At the time, like my aunt had given me some advice about like a disability program that will help you find work. I was adamantly against that because I was adamantly like, I'm not going to get a handout job. It just was never going to be for me unless I could say, okay, I did at least one thing on my own. So I mostly spent that year in Hawaii. Of course, as beautiful as it is, and I would suggest that if you ever get the chance to go, please go. They're beautiful people, beautiful
Amazing.
weather. It was time to get back stateside, and since we have more family in Florida, we decided to land in Florida. At Florida, it was like, okay, I know I want to be in wrestling. And everybody who wants to be in wrestling wants to be a wrestler. And there are great wrestlers with TP. There's Gregory Iron.
Yep.
By your side of the woods, there's a guy named Dan Edge who
Cool.
actually uses walking sticks in the ring, or he
Oh
did at least
wow.
when he was competing. And I'd always wanted to do that. To this day, I've never actually tried, but I'm lucky enough to have a friend in Tony Mango at Bleacher Report who said, "Hey, WrestleZone needs a writer," and I just applied, and pretty much at this point, the rest is history. It's been 4 years. It's been the easiest job for me. Being in Florida has been great because it is a bit of a, you know, it's not as expensive as Hawaii. It's not as expensive as New York, but it's also, you still feel like it's a major part of the world.
Yeah.
So it's been very comforting in that way. And now I'm also branching out and doing things like this because I am learning. I'm a voice in the disability community, even if it just kind of snuck up on me. And I'm glad to be able to branch out in my own way by doing this.
Yeah, well, it's great, and you come across very well as well. Just because
Thank you.
I think again, just hearing, and the reason why I asked that question, hearing that you've been been able to travel around a little bit, I think that's very motivational. Not in terms of the in terms of the sort of inspiration porn type of thing that comes up a lot, but I just think it's cool you bring to Hawaii. I think it's cool that that you've been able to spend time in Florida and just been able to travel around and do that kind of thing because it's possible, and I think that's what I'm trying to get at is you doing it. And because I've been able to live and work in Boston, in Massachusetts, and I've talked about that publicly, and the fact that you, obviously the focus here is on you, Robert, are doing these things, traveling to these places is motivational to people. So that's why I've kind of gone down that line of questioning. And thank you so much for telling me a little bit more about your childhood and your background. And it sounds like you've had a very cool existence so far.
And it is very cool to be able to say, I spent a year in Hawaii, but I do want to touch on the topic of inspiration porn because, like, you have to understand this is why I say don't be like me because I, for a long time, was very bitter and just salty about my circumstances and my lot in life. And I would say
Mm,
that, like, that probably took more years away than I could have ever imagined. So my suggestion to anyone watching is, first of all, look, I get it. Inspiration porn, it can be a lot of like, okay, we get it. you're inspirational. And I do want to say that those feelings are real and you should be allowed to feel them. But there is also a point where you have to know that for you, you need to kind of be able to live and find peace with who you are,
Mm.
because that's the only way you're ever going to just be able to wake up in the morning and give it your best shot. And that's all really anybody can do. But I do want to say that to anyone struggling with that side of things, where you might feel like you're too bitter when the world's telling you, do the best with what you got, I understand. And I'm very sympathetic towards that, because I was that way for probably way too long.
Mm.
Now,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting point you make. You mentioned, again, kind of being comfortable with yourself and learning to be comfortable with yourself. Can you, Robert, take me to that point where because you mentioned being salty, and understandably, I've been there. I've been there a lot, where you don't want to get out of bed and you're struggling with that kind of, yeah, just oh man, things are really tough, things are really hard. Why are things this way, etc. Can you take me to that transitional point where you were like, I'm gonna make this change. I'm not necessarily stop feeling this way 100% of the time, because I don't think you can do
right.
that. But like that transitional point where you kind of were like, yeah, this is me. This is who I am, and I am. I'm gonna put myself out to the world in the way that you have been doing.
And I do want to say that, like, again, for anyone struggling, I don't want to make it sound like it was a light switch, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a daily process. You are still always going to have those days where you're like, man, I really wish that things weren't this way. But you also have to be able to look around and look at the one or two things you can cherry pick as positives and say, you know what? I do have a great community around me. I do have like people who you like me for me and what I present. And it doesn't always have to be like, man, this is such a curse, even though you're always going to have days where you do go back to that. I think it's also important to go, yes, but also on the flip side, it's probably never been more doable to live a life with cerebral palsy and live a pretty traditional life at that. There are services that are able to, like, you know, if you don't drive, there's Ubers. If you don't, if you need to get groceries, there's all these different things. And I think I also feel very fortunate in that, like, I came around at the right time. Sorry,
Oh,
something just dropped there.
it's okay,
I
don't worry.
I came around at the right time where I can do the best I can and really live a pretty full life, And I think always find something to be grateful for, but also don't feel like you have to ignore those feelings, because that's a real part of the experience and that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you've done a lot of growth and development, not just through your work and stuff, but just yourself being able to find that confidence and that kind of you mentioned self-awareness, you know what I mean, earlier. It feels like you're quite self-aware and quite you understand yourself a bit more. I don't know if that's, I mean, obviously I have 20 minutes of knowledge of you, having met you, but if that's if you feel like a very self-aware person, Robert.
I think that's a very fair description, and I think again sometimes that's a very good quality to have. You know what you're bringing to the table. You know what's the best thing you can provide, and you also, it can be a bit of a slight in that sometimes it will still prevent you from doing something because you could be too in your head by being so self-aware. But I am glad to have even that knowledge to say what I just said, where I know that sometimes my own self-awareness can keep me from doing stuff. But again, it's a process, and every day I think I'm getting better and better with it.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. And let's talk about where you are now. Let's talk about Fightful. Let's talk about, you being, in the disability community as a voice. How kind of, because you mentioned you didn't take no for an answer, which is a lovely idea in principle. It's a lovely, you know what I mean, being that determined to get a job. But if for anybody who's watching, who is a fan of Fightful, a fan of yourself, SRS, and all these other personalities that are a part of Fightful, and maybe thinks Fightful is my dream, Fightful is where I want to be, but they've also, again, they've got that disability, that difference. What kind of key things would you look for for someone, if someone came to you with a different disability, who was interested in doing work, a similar line of what you're doing, what kind of key things would you look for? And crucially, what kind of things would you what kind of things would you shy away from if someone was going to come to you?
I think first and foremost, passion, right? A willingness to learn, a willingness to do better, because you're going to make mistakes. And you're going to, especially if you're in the disability community, you're going to eventually need accommodations. You're going to eventually need to learn how to do things your way. And you're going to have to be patient with yourself. But first and foremost, you always want to present yourself as someone who is willing to put in the work. And
Mm.
I think that's the key. Now, as far as like other characteristics you look for in a person, I think it always helps to have a bit more of a professional background. I'm very fortunate in that I didn't need to. I just had a buddy who had an in, but it would help to have a journalism background. It would help to say, hey, who am I? What can I bring to wrestling journalism that isn't there? Maybe it's specific coverage on tag team wrestling. Maybe it's just specific coverage on the territories. Maybe you have done extensive research on a topic that only you can cover and no one else can. It really comes down to what are you willing to put in the work for and what can you do that no one else can do? Like I'll put a spotlight on Kyler, the guy who runs all the social media for Fightful. He's got cerebral palsy. He's doing stuff now with Denise Salcedo. He's doing great. Dominic D'Angelo, he's got cerebral palsy. He's all over ad-free shows. He's working with Kevin Nash, Mick Foley. I'm so proud of all these guys, but that's what it comes down to. What can I do? What can I bring?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that focus point is there. That's wonderful. Can you then take me through your setup? Because you mentioned that in your interview with Tom Talks Rubbish that your disability didn't really come up in terms of a job interview or a process like that. But you mentioned accommodations and things like that. If you could take me through your setup and just from an outsider, I obviously know. I know Fightful as a fan. I know you from looking at you from on a screen on streams and things. But can you take me through your setup and how how the kind of getting into working with Fightful was? Was it a simple process? Was it easy? Is it you and a webcam? Bam, that's it. Or what's was it a complex system or was it a simple transition for you? Getting starting with Fightful.
So I started wrestling journalism with WrestleZone.
Yeah.
I Tony
You got the
Mango
writing
said,
job. Yeah, the writing job. Yeah,
yeah,
cool.
they needed someone, and I was available, and I started with them, and I worked for another website, eWrestling News, and I had a brief interaction with Sean Ross Sapp. He was actually correcting something, and he and another writer were actually getting into a bit of a spar. But since I was the one who wrote the article, I DM'd him and said, "Hey, man, thank you so much for pointing this out. I've changed that. Thank you. I didn't think I'd ever, whatever. Okay, that was the one interaction." And then a couple months later, he's like, "Hey, we have this weekend job." And this is the part, ladies and gentlemen, where the getting in your own head can almost cost you a spot, because I took about a week to even get back to him because I'm going, I'm a small fish in a small pond. Do I want to try Fightful? Like, do I think I'm ready for that? Of course, I eventually did accept. I have been there now 3 years. They're the best team. Again, the disability in this case has never come up. The only thing I can say for myself is it does take me longer to type out stuff. It does take me longer to like do transcriptions and stuff. So in that sense, I'm a bit slower than the average news writer, but I've also been able to have great opportunities hosting podcasts, which is give me opportunities like this. And I'm always just glad to be a part of it in any way that I can, because I know that it's really, it can lead to anything. You just never know what one knocking on one door, you don't know how many it's going to open. And I think that's the approach I try to take now with Fightful, where I just want to be versatile, and wherever you need me, I'll go and I'll do the best I can at it.
Yeah, fantastic. So you again, you meant you've got your green screen there, you've got your seat. You know, is it as simple as that? You've got your webcam. Like, what kind of things do you need? What kind of gear and equipment then for anybody again with neurodiversity, disability, who's maybe overthinking it? They're thinking, oh, Robert's, he's got like a full studio to be.
So,
He's got to have a full studio for Fightful. So talk me through that and what
so here's
people
the part
need.
where I can honestly say I probably do that to myself, where I
Okay.
go, no, I should probably have full studio. The reality of it is, and I'll point out, Tom talks rubbish. All you need is a good headset with a microphone and a decent enough webcam to get started. And that's the beauty of it. Get started and create as much content as you feel. And as you grow, feel free to make those upgrades as you see fit. Maybe it's a headset microphone for you. Maybe it's, a full on setup. Maybe you want a green screen because you're not in the best, you don't have the best setup behind you. So you want to be able to just put a virtual background. Well, you make those calls as you go. And I think the important thing is to just start, right? Because as somebody who just loves the visual side of all of it, like the graphics and this and that, I get over in my head about that kind of stuff. But really, the meat of it all is just make content, do the best you can with what you have. And at some point, it's all going to click together.
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely, and it's so awesome to hear again. Your experience, and again, just kind of simplifying it down because I know a lot of people they get in their heads, and this goes on to my next question. We're down to the last few here. My next question is something I start my interviews with quite a lot, and I ask a lot of wrestlers this and a lot of musicians because people have different definitions of this. Now, we work with a lot of people that they struggle with that definition of success. They struggle with the idea of it, what it means to them. And I wanted to ask you about your definitions of success and what the term means to you, what relationship you have with the term success, and how you define it really as a person and as a broadcaster, if they're two different things.
Oh, what a beautiful question. Because for me, I think it's one that I wrestle with quite a lot. Because on the one hand, I look at my life as it is in black and white right now and go, 18-year-old me would die for what I'm doing today. But of course, the desires of an 18-year-old don't always match the desires of a 29-year-old. And you're always going, okay, what is success? So I think as a person, success for me is being able to do what I love, make a living, but also be able to look around and have, the right circle around you, the right people, so that you can say you're successful in all facets. Success for me in my career, I'm not there. I'll just say that right off the bat. I'm not there. I want to do more interviews. I want to get more into the overall entertainment side of things because while I do love professional wrestling, it is and always will be my first love. I love the music world. I want to put my stamp on that world, on the animation world. I have so many different passions that I think I'm starting to explore now. But success for me, like I'm successful in the eyes of 18-year-old me, but I also want to know that I'll be successful looking back when 50-year-old me is looking back. I want to be able to know that I've made the right steps, and you'll never really know, so you're always kind of wrestling with it, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Absolutely, and I love the continuing use of the term wrestle there. Very cool. It's nicely done. But yeah, I love hearing about that because I think again it sort of it puts things in perspective for me as well. A big fan of your work, and I think you've done you've worked really hard, like we said in the beginning. But like I say, the term success message with it affects people differently, and I think for any young person watching, any person that wants to get into broadcasting, to hear your experiences is really useful. Again, for any young person who is, because I think social media does this, and you'll have to kind of give me your spin on this, but they'll look at you on Fightful and, you know, your articles previously, and they'll think, oh, he's got, you know, thousands of viewers, he's got all these followers on Twitter and everything. And they go, well, I'm never going to be Robert. I can't do that. Whether they've got a different disability or not, we all do it. We all compare ourselves to other people. I think it's a social media issue. So what would be your message to those people that are maybe looking at you and thinking, I'm not that good. I'm never going to be that good. I can't get there.
My answer to that, quite honestly, is you're right. You're never going to be that. Please be better. Please be better. Because anyone out there, disability or not, yes, I have been very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, but you can be so much better than me. I'm trying to be better than the guy I was last week. You're always going to stumble along the way. In our case, quite literally, but you know, just try to be the very best version of you. And I know that's very cheesy as it comes out of my mouth. That is a really cheesy thing to say, but it's really the only thing that you can ask of yourself. And I think we live in a time now where, like you said, social media, it makes it so easy to beat up on yourself. Like I do it too. You know, I'll see someone from I knew from a long time ago and go, well, they're having more real world success than me. Does that make me, you know, less than? Because we all do it. It's just human nature. But I would say just continue being your very best every day. And I promise those little steps do eventually add up to something that you can be proud of.
Absolutely, man. And there's a lot to be proud of. This isn't me blowing smoke up your ass. Like, a lot to be proud of with what you've done. It's an absolute pleasure to sit with you today. Couple of quick fire questions then, and then we'll round up. You mentioned your taste in music and be, you know, like you taste in music. So give me a little example of that. Give me like, do you have a top 3 favorite bands or artists that you go to for motivation?
Foo Fighters are my favorite band of all time.
Nice.
Period. Point blank.
Excellent.
I think Dave Grohl is fantastic. I love Dance Gavin Dance.
Nice.
Great band. I'm a big Beatles guy.
Nice.
But I also, at the same time, like I love like synthwave kind of music, and I'm a big fan of '90s, you know, Europop. And
Yeah.
I like music wise, I'm just fascinated by so many different styles, and I think I carry that a lot just in life. Like that's the way I approach wrestling. I'm not just a fan of bell to bell. Wow, that was fun. I also like seeing Warrior versus Savage. Like
Yeah.
I try not to close myself off to too much, but musically, if I had to zone in on one thing, it's probably the alternative rock.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I grew up on that sort of stuff too. That's nice. Have you been to many live shows? Is that something you kind of look back on fondly if you have been?
I've been barreled into in a mosh pit with a walker. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fun.
nice. Yeah, nice.
That's
Excellent.
that's a lot of fun. I also went to the 2014 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Great moment. Got to see Nirvana get inducted.
Oh,
Really
wow.
cool. Got to see Kiss get inducted. They didn't play, but I got to see them. You know. So I've been to a few live shows. I always want to do more. You know, I mean, like you're always pushing for the next experience. But yeah, music is such a big part of it. Like when you need just the energy, like throw on whether it's you know the Foo Fighters or whether it is like throw on some Motorhead, you know, just whatever you need to get in the zone.
Absolutely. Do you have that track? I mean, obviously, it's me putting you on the spot, Robert, and I appreciate that. Do you have a favorite song for that motivation, like one that you can automatically, you know, pull out that you
So
always go to?
I'll give you the wrestling one. I'll give you just the regular.
Excellent.
My wrestling theme, as cheesy as this is, I will put the game by Motorhead on a loop
Yeah.
if I need to just stay in that zone. But I will also put All My Life by the Foo Fighters.
Cracking tune.
You know, it really is exactly what you need to get up and go. And sometimes you do need that pick me up, and I'm lucky that music is able to do that for me.
Absolutely. And I think we do have to ask, you know, a little bit about wrestling as well. If you can take me back to a moment or a series of moments, you know, that have made the hairs on your neck stand up. I'm sure you do get this with music as well, but as a long-time wrestling fan, for me, it was Mankind winning the champion, or Mick Foley winning the championship for the first time on a Raw against The Rock. That like made me cry, still does to this day. It was one of my favorite interviews was with Mick Foley, favorite of all time. But again, for you personally, do you have that spine tingling wrestling moment that like brings you to tears or just makes you happy? A memory like that.
God, there's quite a few because, like, I remember watching on a very, very small TV Edge and Eddie Guerrero in 2002 and just going, oh my God, I think I'm watching magic here. And they don't do this on TV. And I had those moments again, like Shawn Michaels, Shelton Benjamin. Like when you're watching a really good match and you realize, oh my God, we're experiencing this in real time. I had that moment with Omega and Okada several times over with them. But I think most recently, and honestly, talk about tears, CM Punk returning at
Yeah, man.
the United Center was just like this real moment of we are living this great moment. We should really, really soak it in because I think if anything you've learned from that story, you never know when it's all going to be over. And I think that's the beauty of wrestling and of storytelling is these moments. And these are the moments that you're chasing because we're all looking to do that in life, right? We're all looking for that, like, aha, this is the moment that you want to like replay in your mind before it's all over. And I think that's the button that wrestling presses for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, I do want to squeeze this one in. Talking about moments you've created. I loved watching your Gregory Irons interview. I do like what I do love watching your work. It was lovely to see your interview with Tom Talks Rubbish. These are broadcasting things, but work-wise, personal life. What have been some moments for you then that you will always look back on? Whether it's stuff you've done with Fightful, whether it's stuff you've done with your family in Hawaii, moments that you still look back on and go, man, that was cool. You know what I mean? Things that you love.
So I have three nieces, a nephew, and then another nephew on the way. Um, my brother's kids, they love watching me on YouTube. And I like, honestly, like that's the moment where you talk about success. And whenever I get that picture of them watching me, I'm just like, you can't touch this. You
Yeah.
know, like this is a really special moment because like while I'm just a guy talking into a camera, like they think I'm so cool just because I'm on YouTube and like that to me means everything so a lot with them because they're still so young that I do just cherish any interaction I get to have with them at all. Um, there's also we did a Fightful Christmas stream and Sean Ross Sapp said some really nice things. And he said, when he started the weekend position, he specifically came to me. And as I said, I was kind of trepidatious about answering. I have since kept that clip and replayed it. It was like one of the first times where my mom was like, wow, I'm really proud of you. So, like, that sticks with you. Just little moments like that, I think, have really helped. And then there's stuff like the Greg Iron interview. Because I remember when my friend, I was like 14 or 15, wanting to be a wrestler, and my friend was like, okay, there's this guy and he's doing it. So, like, that's so cool to me that this guy that I looked up to is now kind of my bud. Like that's just a really cool thing. And
Absolutely, man.
it's little moments like that that make all of this worth it.
Absolutely. Thank you for recounting those with me because again, that what a lovely moment talking about your family there. Watching you on YouTube, members of your family there. It's a beautiful thing. And congratulations
Well,
on
thank you.
all of your success and may it continue. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing some more stuff with you in the future because I've got a lot of I've there's some similarities there, and I just think like the stuff you've done and some of the things you kind of worked on. I just think it's really cool, man. So just want to while I've got you with me, I just want to say that really really well done, mate. Um, Before we finish off, then you mentioned your family there. Obviously that we've reached the plugging bit, but before that, before I ask you, anything you want to plug, what is your message to followers in the UK? You mentioned, you've got friends all over the world now. Obviously, people watch you from all over the world. What is your message to followers of yourself, Fightful, the people that support what you do from all over the world? What would you like to say to them?
I would say we are in one of the most confusing times ever to be a human being. And do not lose sight of you because we're in a time right now where it's very easy to kind of sway to one side or the other, just in general with ideologies. And I feel like we're in a culture that's really kind of gravitating towards the need for groups and like hive mind thinking. And that's good because it is good to find like minded people, but also never lose sight of you. And I think that that's just a general message that I think all people should try to keep in mind.
Absolutely, man. I love that. I do. And obviously, in terms of plugging, anything you want to plug, anything you feel like we might have missed that you want to shine a light on before we finish.
Just follow me everywhere at DudeFelice. That's DuDeFelice. Um, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. Follow Fightful Select. Honest to God, it's one of those things with my job. You talk about success. Sean Ross Sapp is legitimately like the best at what we do. And it's so weird to know that I get text messages from my brother. Like, I hear this guy's name everywhere. How do you feel about working with him? And it's so surreal sometimes. So follow Fightful Select, follow WrestleZone. Shout out to Tony Mango, who's just been such a great guide and great friend to me throughout all this. Shout out to Callum Wiggins, who's over on your side of the woods, who I do a lot of work with in a Smart Out Moment, and he's just an awesome guy. So really, just shout out to everybody that I work with, and shout out to just everyone who wants to do this kind of thing. Keep chasing it, because listen, Sean's great, but Sean and Dave Meltzer, they can't do it forever. So find your niche, find your way in, because you can make that impact too.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. What a great message to leave on. Thank you so much for your time, mate. I really, really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man.